Exposed: How one single dad's incredible act transformed a struggling CEO's life in just 30 days. Jake Thompson stood in the heart of his cluttered shop, grease-stained fingers gripping a wrench as he peered under the hood of an old sedan. His heart raced, but not from the thrill of the task at hand, no. Today it came from the mounting bills stashed on his kitchen table, reminders of how close he was to losing everything. Being a single dad to 2 kids weighed heavily on him. But then again, that weight was what kept him motivated. He couldn't let his children see their father crumble under the relentless pressure of never-ending expenses. Lily and Noah were counting on him, and the thought ignited a flicker of determination within him. As he turned back to the car, his thoughts spiraled. If only he could land a big job, something that wouldn't just cover the bills but allow him a moment's relief. However, his dreams felt as rusty as the vehicles he repaired. How was he supposed to provide? His self-doubt gnawed at him. While he took pride in instilling strong values in Lily and Noah, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was failing them. What kind of father couldn't he even make ends meet? The voices in his head taunted him as he wiped sweat from his brow, clouding every moment with a stark reminder of his limitations. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days passed, and the pressure mounted. Jake's hands trembled while working, not from fatigue but from an overwhelming sense of urgency. Each day he watched as the bills piled higher. Fear and despair loomed like shadows in his shop. Then Lily burst in one evening, a whirlwind of excitement in her voice. "Dad! I found this bug in code while working on a school project. It's a vulnerability." Her eyes sparkled with the thrill of discovery, yet Jake felt a shiver of uncertainty snake down his spine. Was this the big break he desperately needed? Or just another hairpin turn in the labyrinth of his worries? His heart wavered with the decision to reach out to Rebecca Mills, the struggling CEO whose company was hanging by a thread. Could this be the lifeline both of them needed? Or an even bigger misstep? He found himself questioning his worth, feeling inadequate standing in the shadow of someone once at the top. How would he even approach her? The fear of rejection coiled in his gut, tightening like an unforgiving vice. And yet, the thought of failing Lily and Noah pushed him forward, deeper into the murky waters of uncertainty. The day Jake finally decided to contact Rebecca, his resolve felt quaky, as if he stood on the edge of a precipice. He stared at the words composing his email, doubts racing through his mind. Would she welcome a single dad into her world of high stakes? The looming betrayal from within her company filled him with dread. As he clicked send, his breath hitched a leap of faith into darkness, weighed down by the looming specter of his own insecurities. What lay ahead threatened to expose everything they had built, everything they wished to protect. As Jake stood at the threshold of a crucial decision, he could feel his life's direction pivoting like a key turning in a lock, both thrilling and terrifying. Would their bond withstand the storm, or would the jagged edges of ambition ultimately tear them apart? Little did he know, the next 30 days would not only test their limits but reveal unexpected truths about themselves, dreams, hopes, and wounds, prompting him to confront questions he had buried deep within. Jake settled into a grueling rhythm in the days following his email to Rebecca Mills. Each dawn broke with renewed anxiety as the reality of his situation lingered, an unwelcome guest that refused to leave. The workshop, once a sanctuary from his troubling thoughts, felt increasingly claustrophobic, the echo of wrench on metal drowned by his internal turmoil. What if she never responded? What was the point of reaching out if it led to more disappointment? But beneath the doubt, a flicker of ambition ignited. He needed to prepare, not just for the potential of working with Rebecca but for the possibility of change. Turning this fear into motivation felt like a mountain to climb. He sought out resources online, watching countless videos on business strategy, leadership, and negotiation skills. He absorbed everything he could, eager to equip himself for a conversation that could alter the course of his life. Each night, after tucking the kids into bed, he would pore over articles until sleep claimed him, hoping that knowledge would banish the specter of inadequacy. Then, a day later than he had anticipated, his phone buzzed with an incoming email. Heart racing, Jake's fingers trembled as he tapped the screen to open Rebecca's response. Her words were measured yet inviting, acknowledging his email and expressing a willingness to meet. As he read the message, the corners of his mouth twitched upwards. The door was open, and for the first time in weeks, hope blossomed. This initial satisfaction quickly transformed into a spiral of nerves. Jake knew that stepping into Rebecca's world meant navigating corporate politics, sharp minds, and calculated risks. It wasn't just a job interview, he was stepping into an arena where the stakes were high. He couldn't afford to show weakness. His thoughts raced with every potential scenario, each more terrifying than the last. What if his ideas fell flat? What if he stumbled over his words, revealing the insecurity that gnawed at his core? Instead of surrendering to panic, Jake channeled the pressure into practice. He stood before the mirror, rehearsing his pitch as if the reflection were an audience. He mapped out the vulnerable code that Lily had discovered, tying it back to Rebecca's company goals. "I'll present solutions," he muttered, pacing the cramped space. "Adaptability is key. I can bring a fresh perspective." With every test run, his confidence grew a fraction, as did his resolve to not just be another cog in the machine but to contribute something meaningful, a sense of belonging he had long desired. But Jake was still aware that his journey was not only professional, it was deeply personal. The more he prepared, the more he confronted the anxieties that had plagued his fatherhood. Would he be misunderstood in his role as a dad? Was this process stealing time away from Lily and Noah? Every moment he devoted to his own ambitions felt like a trade-off. A day passed, and the meeting loomed large. He felt simultaneously ready and profoundly unprepared. As the hour approached, he found himself staring at his reflection again, but this time something different flickered in his eyes. It was not just determination, it was the very essence of a father willing to fight for something greater than himself. The moment he stepped into the conference room, the smooth marble felt almost foreign, the scent of polished wood and fresh coffee sharper than he remembered. He took a deep breath, absorbing the atmosphere, reminding himself that he belonged here if only to advocate for himself and his children. As he straightened his shoulders, ready to dive into the unknown, he realized that the stakes weren't merely corporate. They were personal, and this meeting might reveal more than just professional potential. But as he began to speak, an unforeseen obstacle arose. The room was filled with expectant eyes, each scrutinizing every move he made, waiting to see how far a single dad could really reach. Would he crumble, or rise to the occasion? The moment felt electric. Jake had stepped onto the battlefield, and the fight for his future was about to begin. As Jake began to speak, he felt himself drawn into a current of thoughts even more tumultuous than the past weeks had prepared him for. The audience leaned forward, not just physically but with an emotional investment. They weren't just seeking answers, they were probing for authenticity. Each gaze felt like an unspoken challenge. Could he deliver? "Thank you for the opportunity," he started, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'm here to present a solution that not only addresses current vulnerabilities but also offers a path to sustainable growth." As he spoke, he noticed Rebecca at the far end of the table, her expression unreadable, but her eyes sharp, taking in every word, every gesture. He held the clicker in his hand, guiding the presentation slides. Reams of data and strategy flashed behind him, but in that moment, all Jake could focus on was the rhythm of his breathing. The vulnerable code Lily found can be analyzed further to ensure not just security but also customer trust. He emphasized adaptability, framing it as crucial for the future. With every passing minute, Jake felt a struggle within himself. Self-doubt clawed at the edges of his confidence. What if the charts and graphs didn't impress them? What if they only saw him as the father struggling to keep his family intact? He could almost hear echoes of his own thoughts mocking him, questioning his worthiness not just as a professional but as a father. After he summarized his points, Jake sensed a change in the room's atmosphere. Questions started flying his way, sharp and probing, each one a potential landmine. What metrics support your claims? Rebecca asked, leaning slightly, her intensity palpable. He hesitated, but the moment felt heavy with his need to rise. I've adapted insights from industry leaders and various case studies to back these claims. The evidence is there, you just need to look at similar scenarios where these approaches have been implemented successfully. Jake's eyes darted briefly over the room. There was a flicker of acknowledgement from one of the other attendees. A tentative nod. He felt a rush of adrenaline. Perhaps he could resonate with them after all. But just as that sense of triumph began to swell, the elegant poise of another board member chipped away at it. And what experience do you have that we haven't seen from others? A woman with sharp features demanded, her tone critical, almost dismissive. We've had many proposals before. Why should we believe you will succeed where others have not? The question struck him hard, scolding and raw. He had anticipated challenges, yet this one struck to the heart of his insecurities. Surely they didn't just see him as a single dad. They saw the amalgamation of his fears, failures, and professional limitations. It was as if she had peeled away his layers, exposing raw flesh beneath. For a moment, he felt himself falter. Yet beneath the vulnerability simmered a primal instinct to defend not just his ideas but also the identity he was creating anew. Because I understand failure, he replied, surprising even himself. I've faced personal struggles that have taught me resilience. I know what it means to adapt and listen to shift strategies in real time to cater to real needs. The intensity in his voice brought a different energy to the room. He laid bare not just his professional ambition but a human truth that went beyond suits and salaries. He was not just there to impress but to advocate not only for himself, but for all fathers striving to balance chaos with aspiration. As the session rolled closer to conclusion, Jake sensed a flicker of interest, perhaps even respect. Yet, at that moment, a shift happened in him, and what that woman had seen as weakness transformed into a powerful narrative. He could confront their suspicion with his authenticity. But just as he prepared for wrap-ups with newfound determination, Rebecca leaned in, a hint of a smile playing on her lips, and asked, Jake, what drives you if not the ambition to elevate your career? What do you really want? The directness of her question tore through his rehearsed responses, exposing him to deeper introspection. The room held its breath as he stood at the precipice, on the verge of unveiling something much more profound. Jake's palms felt clammy, but this might be the crucial moment to distill everything he had held back. Would he share the truth of his passion or retreat into safe vagaries? He swallowed hard, his heart pounding, and the words began to take shape on his lips, ready to reveal not just the man he wanted to be, but the father he aspired to become. In that charged silence, Jake felt the weight of expectations pressing down on him. As the question hung in the air, he took a breath, centering himself. This was more than a presentation, it was a crossroads. The tension in the room shifted from skeptical to something more dynamic. It was a shared moment of vulnerability, and he could sense it. He cleared his throat, trying to find the right words. What drives me, he began slowly, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat echo in his ears, is the desire to create an environment where my children can thrive. It's not just about climbing the corporate ladder for me, it's about showing them that perseverance matters. I want them to see the value in sticking to your convictions, in fighting for what you believe is right, especially when the odds are stacked against you. As he spoke, he caught Rebecca's eye again. The flicker of interest turned to something deeper, a glimmer of understanding that made something shift within him. If he could connect with just one person in this room, perhaps this wasn't merely an exercise in professional posturing. This could be the moment where authenticity tempered ambition. Jake could see it in the faces of the board members. Some were nodding, others were exchanging glances, but all seemed captivated by this thread of honesty woven into the fabric of his professional proposal. And suddenly, the numbers blurred in his mind. The charts that had once seemed so vital now took a backseat to the thrust of his emotions. I've failed more times than I can count, he said, his voice steadying. But every failure has taught me something invaluable. It shapes how I approach challenges. I am someone who listens, who innovates when faced with hurdles. An unexpected surge of confidence surged within him. The underlying principles that had guided him through personal struggles started to align with his professional narrative. My experiences may not fit the conventional mold, but they have equipped me with the unique perspective necessary to drive change in my personal life and here, in this business. As he continued, driven by a newfound purpose, he could almost feel the walls in the room crack. Each sentence was crafted to communicate not just a strategy, but a commitment, a deep yearning to redefine success. This wasn't merely about financials. This was about building a legacy. Jake paused to gather himself. He had ventured beyond spreadsheets and forecasts, entering the realm of human truth. In the faces before him, he recognized a connection, a bridge built from shared vulnerability and courage. Maybe it's messy. Maybe it's not traditional, he concluded, his voice growing firmer with belief. What I truly want is to be a catalyst, sparking innovation not just for profits, but for people. That is what I can offer you. A silence followed his declaration, but it was filled with possibility. Slowly, the room began to stir, a hum of discussion reigniting among the board members. Rebecca's expression had shifted into one of contemplation. He knew instinctively that he had crossed the threshold, but to what end? As Jake prepared to step back, his heart was racing not from fear, but from exhilaration. No longer did he just carry the title of father or employee. He was standing firm in his identity. Yet just as he felt the momentum building, a hand shot up a face he'd overlooked. But what happens when your personal drive collides with decisions that could risk the company's future? The voice interrupted, challenging yet curious. Jake's stomach churned. The moment had come for a different kind of introspection. How would he reconcile these dual aspects of his life? They were intertwined now, and that collision could define him in ways he had yet to discover. Are you prepared for that conflict? The voice insisted, laying bare the risks of melding personal passion with professional responsibility. Caught off guard, Jake's thoughts started to whirl. This wasn't just about his transformation. It was about how far he was willing to go in this journey of self-revelation. What line was he willing to cross? He searched for words, acutely aware of the gazes directed at him, and as the pressure escalated, it became clear he stood at another precipice, one that would determine more than just the fate of the proposal. Would he find the resilience to confront this new challenge? The energy shifted again, pulling tighter as he prepared to respond. Jake's pulse quickened as he faced the challenge head-on, the room now a pressure cooker of scrutiny. He realized that his previous attempts to merge personal and professional aspirations had been tentative, almost apologetic. Now, standing in front of the board, he was compelled to embrace the complexity of his duality outright. Every decision carries weight, he began, his voice steady, yet resonating with the intensity of the moment. I understand the stakes, and I know I will have to make choices that may not always align with my personal values. He saw a flicker of intrigue among the members. This was it. He had to confront the tangled web remaining in his heart. The truth is, Jake continued, I might have to risk what I believe for the sake of a greater good, the company's future. But that doesn't mean I've abandoned my principles. I will always search for solutions that marry both ideals. I am not looking to create conflict, rather, I want to ignite progress. His hands were unclenched now, a reflection of how he had begun coming to terms with his role. The vulnerability he had previously sheltered transformed into a steady clarity that fortified his argument. What if I fail? What if our decisions compromise integrity? The voice interjected, still challenging but now with less hostility. How do you plan to maintain your vision while being chained to corporate responsibilities? A deeper truth dawned on Jake. He wasn't merely carving out his identity through this endeavor. He was also defining the kind of leader he wanted to become. Crafting his answer, he sought to articulate a vision aligned with personal integrity and corporate accountability. If I allow my failures to dictate my decisions, I'll simply be repeating past mistakes. But if I embrace them, if I incorporate lessons learned, then I give myself permission to innovate. I will not shy away from conflict. I will engage with it. Our industry is evolving, and we cannot detach our ethical framework from our strategic direction. The board exchanged glances, intrigued by his shift in tone, but skepticism still loomed like a cloud overhead. Jake could feel their resistance. There were many who clung to the old ways. He knew that he had to offer more than rhetoric, he needed to lay out a plan. "Allow me this," he urged, his voice gathering momentum. "I propose a task force dedicated to analyzing any potential conflicts between innovation and integrity. It can be a space where we discuss fears openly, evaluate risks transparently, and share responsibilities. Together, we can create stalwart leadership instead of reactive decisions. I'm committed to being the catalyst in this environment." The silence that followed was dense with contemplation. Jake could feel the eyes of the board weighing the merits of his proposition. He sensed some relenting, but the tension remained palpable. Was this enough? Caught in the thoughts that danced in his mind, he had to consider one final revelation. He was laying bare not just his vision, but his vulnerability, the raw stakes of who he was becoming. Would that vulnerability be his greatest asset or his undoing? Then, he caught Rebecca's gaze once more. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, as though weighing Jake's words against her own understanding of the corporate terrain. He de-established a connection, but would it be enough to sway the others? The question stacked. An internal debate raged within him. How far could he take this new sense of self? Would leaning into his authenticity shield him from the inevitable backlash that might come with it? As he awaited their reactions, the room breathed with unspoken uncertainties. Everyone could feel it. The moment was heavy with potential, each second stretched thin. He had taken substantial risks, and now it was up to the board to decide how they would respond. "You've sparked my interest, Jake," Rebecca finally said, her tone carefully measured, yet there was a glimmer of intrigue blossoming in her voice. "But let us turn the question back to you. Are you prepared to risk your position for your vision?" The challenge hung there, a precipice of its own, and in that instant, he realized that the journey ahead was no longer just about the company. It was a crucible for his personal evolution. Would he face the rising tide, or would he recede into fear? With the air charged with unpromised futures, Jake pondered what lay ahead, bracing himself for the turbulent ride. The stakes had never felt so high, and he had never felt more alive. Jake's heart raced, yet a tangible calm settled over his mind as Rebecca's question reverberated in the air. The challenge was more than a test of his professional resolve. It was a pivotal moment of self-examination. Could he truly stand by his convictions in the face of potential backlash? The weight of her scrutiny pushed him further toward the brink of self-discovery. "I believe I can navigate both," he replied, his voice steady. An unexpected determination surged within him. "This task force is not just an idea. It's the embodiment of my commitment to balance innovation with integrity, two pillars upon which this company must stand if we are to grow." In that moment, he envisioned the task force not simply as a corporate strategy but as an extension of himself, the very essence of blending his personal ideals with his professional ambitions. He had a vision, and for the first time, it felt undeniably grounded. "Tell us more about your vision for the task force," another board member piped up, his skepticism softening. Jake turned to him, eyes alight with fresh zeal. Here was an opening. He leaned forward, the silence of the room nurturing the fervor blossoming within him. "We'll begin with workshops focused on open dialogue, where team members can voice ethical concerns and fears. From there, we'll redefine risk management, ensuring decisions take both profitability and ethics into account. The members of this task force will not be mere spectators. They must be invested leaders, willing to lean into their discomfort and challenge the status quo." Jake's mind raced through the implications. Each word was intended to dismantle the old paradigm, layer by layer. The once thick cloud of skepticism that loomed among the board members began to dissipate, replaced by inquisitive glances and tentative nods. But then doubt crept back in. Jake's pulse quickened again as he recalled the dissenting voices behind his own initial decisions. What if they saw this as a threat rather than an opportunity? Would they resist? "What do you think, Rebecca? Are you willing to be a part of this?" He carefully directed the question her way, wanting to leverage their connection. Her brow remained furrowed, but a flicker of understanding crossed her face. I've seen the potential for change, but it requires more than just a motive. It necessitates work, real work. Are you ready to commit, because once you walk this path, there will be no turning back, Jake? He inhaled deeply, processing her words. This was it. This was the crux of his journey. Transformative change was never born from comfort. It emerged in the heat of struggle. A vision could only be realized through relentless action. I'm motivated not just by what we stand to gain but also by what we stand to lose. If we fail to evolve, we risk losing touch with what really matters, our integrity, and the trust of those who work for us. I refuse to let fear dictate my future. I'm ready to commit. The room hung in charged silence. By embracing his fear and accepting it as part of the process, Jake felt an empowering conviction solidify within him. For the first time, he sensed his role as a leader was not just about steering the company. It was about inspiring others to examine their own values and forge their paths alongside him. As murmurs shifted through the board, an unexpected ally emerged from the shadows, a seasoned executive who had always been a silent observer. I admire your courage, Jake, she spoke, breaking the tension. Count me in. I want to be part of this task force. Relief and anticipation intertwined in Jake's chest, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that this journey was only beginning. He still had to confront the deeper issues of trust and vulnerability that such a major shift would stir within the corporate fabric. As he reflected on the looming decision ahead of them, a fresh wave of uncertainty washed over him. What other sacrifices would he need to make? Could the others truly embrace this change, or would the corporate culture resist him altogether? With every moment that passed, Jake realized the boardroom was but a microcosm of his own transformation, a place of conflict and potential. Would he continue to lean into his authenticity, or would the pressures of traditional expectations pull him back into the shadows? With his heart pounding, he turned to face the board once more, ready for whatever might come next. The realization struck him like a lightning bolt. He wasn't just paving a new path for the company, he was ready to confront his own limitations as a leader. The stakes had never felt so steep, and the outcome remained shrouded in mystery. And this was just the beginning. Would his commitment be enough to rally the board to enact change, or would they push back against the rising tide as he fought to hold his ground? As Jake stood before the board, a palpable tension charged the air. Their reactions were a mix of curiosity and skepticism, and he felt the weight of each gaze. It was both inspiring and paralyzing. He could sense that the proverbial line had been drawn, and his proposed task force was a challenge to the established norms, an invitation to evolve, or perhaps, an icebreaker for an impending conflict. He couldn't afford to feel overly optimistic, though. Doubts crept in as he contemplated not only the corporate climate but also the potential backlash from those resistant to change. Jake found himself grappling with his own limitations. The fear of inadequacy lingered, whispering warnings. Would his vision survive the scrutiny? Let us break into groups, Rebecca suggested, her voice steady as she disrupted his spiraling thoughts. To assess how we will communicate this newfound initiative across teams. If we're going to do this, we need to ensure that everyone is on board. Jake felt a rush of relief mixed with adrenaline. This was the action he had envisioned. But the very real challenge lay ahead. As they divided into smaller discussion groups, he could hear snippets of conversation drifting around him, opinions and reservations blending into a cacophony of worries. Will this cost us? One member said, eliciting a few murmurs of agreement. Does he really know what he is asking for? Another added, skepticism dripping from her tone. Jake's heart sank at the undertones of dissent. Each word they uttered felt like a reminder of every time he had doubted himself whether he was capable of effecting real change within this deeply ingrained culture. The conversations continued, but as Jake listened, he began to organize his thoughts. He would have to confront the hidden fears that motivated their concerns. Rather than responding defensively, he needed to be proactive, not only addressing their doubts but transforming them into a collective sense of purpose. After the break, when the groups reconvened, Jake took a deep breath, recalling the transformative power of vulnerability he had recently embraced. I appreciate the candid feedback, he began, carefully choosing his words. But let us not lose sight of why we're here. The world is changing rapidly, and so must we. If we can't align our internal values with external expectations, we face a true crisis. It's time for us to be honest about our contributions ethically and otherwise. He employed a strategy of transparency, sharing snippets from his own journey as a father who fumbled but consistently tried to do right by his children. When you become a parent, you realize that it's no longer about just you. You have to approach challenges differently. It's about legacy. What do we want our cultural legacy to be? A company that is stale and resistant to growth, or one that empowers its people? A subtle shift occurred. Some faces softened, intrigue replacing skepticism. Jake leaned into this moment, drawing on the qualities he had often felt were lacking in leadership, authenticity, and emotional connection. We all are complex beings navigating our own lives. I assure you, it's scary to step out in faith, whether as a parent trying to provide or as a leader looking to foster innovation. As he spoke, he became seriously aware that revealing his vulnerabilities invited others to reciprocate. Ideas began to flow, new contributions emerged organically, and whilst resistance still simmered, it was tempered by discussions about possibilities rather than limitations. Feeling invigorated by their tentative engagement, Jake concluded the session with a call to action. I ask each of you to take a step back and consider what it would mean to truly commit to this task force. Can we redefine our narratives to integrate leadership with integrity? Can we allow that change begins within us? He waited, breathless, for a response. The room was momentarily silent, but Jake was unfazed. But as the murmurs began again, another voice called out from a corner, a prominent, but dissenting board member known for his staunch adherence to traditional values. This sounds like an idealistic venture, Jake, but do you have any real strategy for implementation? Conviction alone will not carry us. The challenge was laid bare, and Jake's heart quickened at the direct confrontation. This was the pivotal moment. Would he retreat, or embrace the conflict and lay bare his plan in a way that held the board accountable? As he opened his mouth to respond, a knot tightened in his stomach. The moment had arrived to confront not only the board's doubts but his own fears of inadequacy. Would his ideals be enough to rally support, or was this just the beginning of a battle he hadn't accounted for? Jake felt the weight of the board member's words hang heavy in the air, challenging his conviction and cutting through the growing momentum he had only just begun to build. A small flicker of doubt ignited in the back of his mind. What if he had misjudged the audience? What if his vision was merely an illusory dream? Thank you for your question, he said, forcing himself to maintain eye contact with the board member, who wore an expectant expression. I acknowledge that vision without strategy is futile, and I assure you, I have been working on a detailed plan. He inhaled deeply, remembering late nights spent analyzing past projects, seeking similarities in methodology, and compiling the feedback from his team. All his insights coalesced into a roadmap that bridged their current state with the future he envisioned. It was now or never time to present not just a dream, but a scaffold for achieving it. First, I propose establishing clear objectives that align with our company values, he continued, his voice gaining confidence. We can implement monthly milestones for accountability. This task force will focus on integrating innovative practices across departments while offering tangible results to measure progress. And each member will be responsible not only for their specific goals but also for ensuring that their teams understand and embrace the changes. Jake looked around the room, seeking signs of engagement. Some members leaned in, their interest seeming genuine. He could see slight shifts in torso angles, how eyes focused more intently on him. Perhaps vulnerability had created a bridge. This isn't about one philosophy prevailing over another, he added, conscious that he was treading into potentially dangerous territory. It's about evolving together, making compromises when necessary. But change demands collective effort. This is not an individual journey. The initial board member shifted in his seat, skepticism still etched on his face but softened slightly. What happens when people resist? I know this group well. They have their routine, and they might not see the benefits you foresee. Jake could feel the stakes rising, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. Resistance will always be a component of transformation, he acknowledged. But I believe resistance can also manifest as a collective strength. We'll host workshops focused on team building and open forums to discuss anxieties impacting employees. By facilitating a safe space, we can turn resistors into advocates. In this moment, Jake realized he was not just defending his idea, he was reconceptualizing it, molding it into something actionable, inclusive. He could sense the shift in the board's energy. Even reheartened skepticism began to fade into curiosity. He wrapped up his pitch with an emphatic point. I'm committed to leading by example. As a father, I've learned that my integrity and authenticity will resonate more than any policy I can instate. If we can embody change as individuals, our legacy as a company will forge a culture that thrives amid uncertainty. The room fell silent as Jake's words began to settle. He felt a flicker of hope blossom in his chest. Maybe this wasn't just an uphill battle. Maybe it was a chance to catalyze something impactful not only for the company but for himself. Then, breaking the stillness, a soft chuckle erupted from the right corner of the room. It was Rebecca, a buoyant smile on her face. You know, she said, light teasing in her tone, I think change is scary, but it's exactly what you've done here today. You've shown us it's possible. Others exchanged uncertain glances but began nodding, a mix of apprehension and intrigue swirling about the room. Before he could even allow a breath of relief, the dissenting board member leaned forward, his interest piqued but still veiled in challenge. Fine, Jake. I'll entertain this idealism of yours. But my question is this: how do you intend to keep us accountable when the inevitable pushback occurs? As the weight of this new question settled on his shoulders, Jake's resolve hardened. This was a pivotal opportunity to put his constructed narrative to the test, a chance to solidify not just a vision, but a plan that would challenge the very bedrock of his own fears. Would he rise to the occasion, transforming discomfort into undeniable determination? Or would he falter, proving his critics right? The moment had come for him to reveal not just his ideas, but the man behind them. A path toward growth waited, though it was obscured by doubts that loomed like shadows, mysterious, foreboding, yet full of possibilities. He leaned slightly forward, igniting a sense of urgency behind his words. He had much more to convey, and this was only the beginning. The question hung in the air like a specter, demanding a response. Jake took a moment, sensing the weight not just of the query but the expectations pinned upon him. He felt the pulse of urgency thrumming through his veins. The line between ambiguity and clarity had never felt finer, yet he pressed onward, ready to confront the challenge. Accountability begins with openness, he stated firmly. We need all stakeholders involved, from executives down to entry-level employees. I propose a bi-weekly review system where teams report on their progress towards specific goals. This transparency will create a culture where we can celebrate wins and address shortcomings early. He could feel the board's scrutiny intensifying. Their expressions ranged from mild interest to thinly veiled disbelief. The dissenting member straightened in his seat. The challenge was evolving into a crucible, one that could either forge him or leave him fractured. Jake continued, moreover, I believe in the concept of leadership as a shared responsibility. I want to invite board members to mentor these task forces. As we lead by example, accountability doesn't come from a place of fear but as an intrinsic motivation to meet our collective aspirations. An unexpected thrill coursed through him, the realization that he was stepping beyond his own comfort zone. In that moment, he wasn't just selling an idea, he was advocating for a paradigm shift that could empower his colleagues. Yet beneath the surface, doubt flickered again like a candle flame in a draft. Would the board truly buy into this shared responsibility when entrenched hierarchies had defined their dynamics? The dissenting member raised an eyebrow, skepticism radiating from him. Sounds promising. But how do you propose we move past the "this is how we've always done it" mindset? In that instant, Jake caught a glimpse of his own narrative mirror. So often had he resisted change, clinging to familiar paths, fearing the uncharted territories of personal growth. Would he let others' rigidities dictate the course of his vision? What we need is a cultural shift to complement the structural changes, he said, feeling the heat of conviction rise within him. We'll begin with pilot programs in a few departments small enough to manage yet impactful enough to demonstrate efficacy. From there, we can leverage early successes to build momentum. Encouragement bubbled in Jake, bolstered by his own clarity of purpose. Change wasn't just a possibility, it was a necessity. His strategies were not mere tactics but embodied a journey, one that could redefine his professional identity, and, by extension, the entire company ethos. He locked eyes with Rebecca, whose nod seemed to affirm his sincerity. There was a flicker of recognition in her gaze, a reminder that they shared the same struggles, the reluctance to move forward, the apprehension about disappointing the ones they led, and most importantly, the hope that their collective efforts could lead to a greater good. Resistance will come, as I said. But it's our collective duty to face it head on, Jake pressed on. We'll set up an anonymous feedback system for employees to voice their concerns. By listening closely to their needs and anxieties, we can demonstrate that they are valued. This shouldn't be perceived as a threat but an opportunity for everyone to thrive. The room felt charged, almost electric, as if they were standing on the cusp of change. Jake could sense the shifting tide. The curiosity of the board members was evolving into genuine consideration. Then, a voice from the far end interrupted the momentum. It was Linda, a board member known for her keen insight but also her sharp tongue. What if you fail, Jake? What if all this effort simply doesn't yield the results you've envisioned? The question cut deep, and implied doubt of his very capability. Yet in that moment, rather than retreating into the shadows of insecurity, Jake felt a surge of defiance. Failure is an option, he stated, his voice steadier than he felt. But it's not the end. It's simply a lesson, a data point that informs our next move. I'm prepared to iterate and adapt based on the feedback and results we gather. He watched as her eyes narrowed slightly. It was clear he was no longer just a hopeful rookie seeking approval. He was asserting his ground. In that assertiveness, he savored a newfound strength and reliability within himself. Yet as the room buzzed with chatter, Jake's mind wandered briefly to his son, his compass, his constant source of strength. He wasn't merely fighting for corporate approval. He was reshaping his future and the legacy he would one day leave behind. As the board began to engage in animated discussions amongst themselves, Jake dared to feel hopeful. For the first time, he sensed that this moment could be a turning point, not just for the company but for him personally. But just when a glimmer of optimism began to take root, Jake felt a familiar gnawing tension in his stomach, self-doubt. Had he pushed too far, too fast? Would they see through his bravado? The clock ticked ominously. With the stakes as high as they now were, failure felt imminent yet transformative. As murmurs swelled in the room, Jake braced himself for the fallout of this pivotal moment, wondering if he could truly handle the heat of impending challenges. What would happen next, he could not predict. But with each hesitation, each moment of uncertainty, a resounding thought solidified: the real challenge was not even at the door, it was yet to unfold. Jake stood at the threshold of transformation, his heart pounding as the board members deliberated his proposal. He had risked everything, his insecurities laid bare, his vision vulnerable to scrutiny. Yet here he was, feeling a shift within himself, a profound realization that he had not just entered a corporate arena but embarked on a journey of self-discovery. A voice broke through his thoughts, calm yet assertive. Jake, your proposals are intriguing, but how can we be assured they will yield tangible results? The speaker was Rebecca, her questioning tone a blend of challenge and curiosity. In that moment, clarity washed over Jake. He thought back to the chaos of his life as a single dad, juggling bills and the constant worry of providing for Lily and Noah. Those fears had ignited a fire within him, not just to survive, but to thrive and create a legacy for his children. He had faced his insecurities, transformed them into motivation, and now it was time to show the board how far he had come. Rebecca, I understand your skepticism, he replied, confidence surging through him. But it is precisely that doubt that fuels this proposal. By implementing a series of measurable key performance indicators alongside our task force goals, we can assess our progress from the outset. Each department will keep track of their contributions, and we will review outcomes bi-weekly. Accountability and transparency will be paramount. Jake's clarity shone bright, illuminating not just the path forward but the depth of his understanding. The stakes were undeniably high. But he had learned that this journey was inherently about progress through resilience, and he was ready to face any fallout. An unexpected wave of support rippled through the room, voices rising in agreement, the energy shifting from doubt to determination. It could work, one board member nodded. This could reshape our yields. Jake felt the warmth of validation, a moment of recognition that he was not alone in this fight. They were united in a collective ambition. The names and faces around him shifted from adversaries to allies. They brainstormed adjustments to his plan, each idea fanning the flames of the initiative he had sparked. Each suggestion felt like a thread weaving them closer together, the arduous task of implementation beginning to feel like a shared adventure rather than a solitary quest. Then Linda spoke again. But what if you, Jake, face pushback in the implementation? After all, changing minds is often harder than changing the system. Jake stood a little taller, drawing strength from his journey thus far. Pushback is a natural component of change, I expect it. I'll initiate an internal advocacy program, pairing task force members with vocal skeptics to find common ground. I want to listen, engage, and pivot as necessary. This will be a team effort. In that moment, Jake realized he was no longer just a single father worried about providing. He was becoming a beacon of resilience, weaving his personal narrative into the corporate identity. The walls that had once felt insurmountable now felt porous, inviting connection and innovation. Hours passed in rapid discussions, strategy sessions blending into a tapestry of possibility. Jake felt the weight on his shoulders lessen as he watched the board actively engage with each other, the once skeptical dynamics shifting toward collaboration. Eventually, Rebecca stood, grounding the conversations that had spiraled into excitement. It seems we have something extraordinary on our hands. Jake, are you prepared to lead this task force and ensure that this initiative reflects what we had hoped for? Without hesitation, Jake met her gaze, newly forged determination coursing through him. I'm ready. This is more than a proposal to me, it's a commitment to the values I want for my children, and I'll fight for that as fiercely as I will for this company. In that moment, he transcended his roles as simply CEO or father. He became a catalyst for change whose voice echoed with authority. The quiet reassurance of his capabilities surged through him, and he recognized that he had not only embraced his fears but had conquered them. As conversations wrapped up, Jake felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. He accomplished what he had set out to do, not merely to present an idea but to transform himself, stepping boldly into a recognized position as not only a professional but an inspired leader. The board approved the task force with palpable enthusiasm, but more importantly, Jake felt a newly established bond with those around him. As he left the conference room, a sense of fulfillment washed over him. He had proven himself the single father, once riddled with self-doubt, had transformed into a solid, confident leader. Jake's journey was clearer now. Every challenge he faced had become a stepping stone toward personal achievement and professional recognition. Now on a path of shared legacy, Jake returned home that night, eager to embrace Lily and Noah, ready to weave his professional triumphs into the foundation of their futures. The fight hadn't ended, it had only begun. The battles ahead required vigilance, but for the first time, he felt ready to take them on. Not just for himself, but for them. You need to subscribe now to our channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories of transformation and triumph. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Every click makes a huge difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending, we want to hear your thoughts. And in this moment of inspiration, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share one of the most powerful personal stories yet.